gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. You know, many give up hope when they're diagnosed with a devastating illness, but today's guests took control of their lives despite what doctors had to say. Now, they've been given a second chance on life. My first guest knew something was terribly wrong with her daughter only weeks after she was born. I want you to take a look at this.
I realized that something was wrong with Grace pretty much about a week after we brought her home. She did a lot of eye rolling and she did a lot of non-tracking, like when I would take a rattle or a toy, she never seemed to follow me. When I would look at her, it was like she looked through me instead of at me. So we went to the ophthalmologist and Grace started to do this movement with her eyes and started rolling her eyes. And he said to me, you know, ma'am, I think that your daughter's having seizures. By 5 months of age, they had to place a feeding tube. And she was blind, still suffered from seizures. Her stem cell was shutting down and she was dying and they didn't know why. And I remember the geneticists came in and they said, we know what's wrong with Grace. I was so happy. In my mind, the fact that they found a diagnosis meant that we could treat Grace. That unfortunately, in the same breath that she said, we have a diagnosis, they told me that I had no prognosis. And they told me that she had this rare disease called mitochondrial cytochrome C reductase deficiency. At that time, they could only find 4 other kids in the world cited in medical journals as having this. Grace was 1.5 years, and no child had lived past the age of 2. They told us to take Grace home, that, you know, I did everything I could do to get the diagnosis, and we found out what was wrong. And the problem is that it's a terminal disease. I couldn't imagine my life without my daughter, and I certainly couldn't imagine burying my daughter.
Please welcome Shannon to the show. And so often, so many other people are sitting at home right now are in the same boat. They go to a doctor, and a doctor will give us a diagnosis. And we have been raised and taught our entire lives to pay attention to what authority figures have to say. And one of the top authority figures that they put in our face is a doctor. But what happens is, a lot of times, parents will listen to what a doctor says, take that as gospel, walk out the door, and in some cases, do exactly what they were going to try to make you do, and that was go home and watch your child die.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Grace is born. You carried her, everything went normal.
Mm-hmm.
Everything seemed normal through delivery, through birth. You started to notice something because I think it's just part of an inherent what goes on inside of a mother, but you're looking at your baby. This is your first child?
Second.
Second, so you already knew what to expect.
Yes, I did.
Something's just not right.
Right. And I called our doctor many times. I mean, when we go back and we look, it was like over 45 times I called them and I said to them, something's not right with Grace.
And what were you seeing when you saw something wasn't right with her?
She wasn't, I was breastfeeding and she wasn't latching on, and I breastfed with my first daughter, so I knew what I was doing, and they kept...
She wasn't holding you, wasn't grabbing.
Exactly, like she wasn't latching, she wasn't tracking when I took a rattle to her. She did a lot of flipping with her eyes would roll up and down constantly, and it was like every time I went to get her, she just had this glazed look on her. It was as if, I mean, I always say she was looking through me. She never looked at me like my other daughter did.
And now, in hindsight, you know that during that period of time, had doctors paid attention to what you had said, they would have realized that early on your daughter was going through multiple seizures, seizure after seizure after seizure after seizure.
Yes.
That probably could have lessened some of the damage.
Absolutely.
No question.
No question.
All right, but we don't know this. So you go to see the doctor, she's normal, it's okay, stop being a hypochondriac mother. Finally, a doctor did note that that eye movement's not normal.
Right, and it was actually, we were supposed to see the neurologist in the same day at the clinic, and instead they met us at the hospital. And they did an EEG on her in the hospital, and within like 5 minutes admitted her, and
knew she was having
she was having seizures.
This is at the 6-month mark too, correct?
This was at 3 months.
3 months. And at 3 months, tell them, how much did your baby weigh?
My baby had continued to drop weight. By that time, she was probably back to 4 to 5 pounds.
A 3-month-old baby at 4 to 5 pounds?
Yes.
Which normally is around 14 to 15 pounds.
Right.
18 pounds, somewhere before you're a big baby, about 18 pounds. So 4 to 5 pounds. And now, she's not putting on any weight at all. No,
she wasn't putting on any weight. And so then she was failure to thrive, and her seizures...
That diagnosis came...
That came when... it's funny, because that didn't come until we were in the hospital. Yet I was taking Grace to the doctor the whole time. But until we got admitted into the hospital, then all of a sudden at 5 months, they come to us and they say, we have to place a feeding tube. that your daughter is going to die if we don't place a feeding tube.
And at this point in time, not only they can come up to you and tell you symptomatically what's wrong, but nobody has an answer to what's wrong.
No. They felt Grace's seizures had turned into infantile spasms to the brain because they went untreated. And then they started to say to me, there's something more. There's an underlying cause for your daughter's seizures and her failure to thrive. And that is when our journey started.
Let's talk about that for half a second. Somebody looks you in the face and says, your child has, and see, for those of you who don't understand what this means, failure to thrive means we don't know.
And that's what they would say. And
they don't know.
They don't know. They said, we have the seizure medicine, and we don't know what's wrong. And I pushed and pushed to say, you got to tell me what's wrong, because I have another daughter, and I need to know why you're telling me my daughter is dying. And you can't just tell me that and then expect me to say, okay, let's go home and be a family.
And just wait for her to die.
And wait for her to die. That wasn't something that I could comprehend.
I got to take a break, but I'm going to tell you, you did more in prompting the doctors to dig harder. There's medication, there's things out there that a lot of us don't even have the slightest clue exist. But the only way you're going to find out about it is if you start digging and doing the research yourself. That's exactly what you did, right? You started digging.
I dug.
They gave you the diagnosis, and you dug. And when we come back, you're going to find out something that will blow you out the door. I'm going to take a little break. We'll be back right after this.